Hello and welcome to a Talk to Stu live stream. This is the first Talk to Stu live stream. And hopefully it'll be the start of many more live streams on this channel. So the purpose of the stream is twofold. Firstly, it gives me an opportunity to record new information videos for people sort of on the fly, and at the same time actually have people listening or viewing these videos and giving people the opportunity to get in on the chat and ask a question if needs be, ideally related to the subject that we're talking about, although it could be any question related to the sort of things that I tend to discuss, which is generally around disability benefits and income benefits, things like that. So the subject for today's live stream is firstly a bit of a news update on what's happening with in the world of disability benefits at the moment. And then also to, on this occasion, have a discussion about the Personal Independence Payment Review form. As you can see, I've recently been sent mine, which is good fun, to get one of those. I'm sure we're all very pleased when we see that brown envelope pop through the door. This, in the last 12 months or so, the Personal Independence Payment PIP review form has changed quite a bit. In the past, they would basically send you the same form that you would fill in the very first place, and it would be that you would need to basically fill that form in its entirety, much as you did the first time you've applied. As I say, it's sort of changed recently, so the form doesn't require that you go into quite so much detail. So we'll come to that shortly, but to start off with, I'll just have a little sip of coffee to wet my whistle. Bit of a news update, although at the moment it's sort of news in the making, in the offing. So you may have seen recently in the mainstream media, in the places where they do talk about this kind of thing, and on some of the more fringe media websites, that we have, first of all, we've got a budget coming up, and one of the things that keeps being mentioned is the question reporters are putting to Tory politicians that might be talking about the upcoming budget in any way, is whether or not they will rule out means testing being applied to disability benefits. Now, this is interesting in itself because, generally speaking, reporters in the mainstream media don't ask this question or these kind of questions of MPs unless they've been briefed to do so. Of course, the answers that are being given are generally avoiding the question answers, and the MPs that are being spoken to, Jeremy Hunt, Rishi Sunak, whoever, refuse to rule it out when they give their answers. So generally speaking, if we think back to when there was talk of VAT rises, the media had been briefed to ask MPs the question, can you rule out any rises to VAT? And of course they would say, well, I don't think it is about whether or not VAT is risen. It's more about us thinking about how we need to approach the challenges that we face economically at the moment, which is, of course, not ruling it out and not answering the question. And of course, what happened? They put VAT up to 20%. So for most of us who do this kind of work, we are quite concerned about the idea of means testing being applied to benefits such as children's DLA, personal independence payment, disability living allowance, and other things. Now, we've kind of had a hint that this would be in the offing due to publications that came out earlier in the year from the Department of Work and Pensions, which had a number of worrying things in there, including a sort of strengthening and extra funding into the fraud department of the DWP, giving them more powers to do things like investigate your Facebook page to find any evidence that might indicate that you're not as disabled as you say you are, with a lot of statistics being put out, most of which aren't verified, suggesting that, you know, the amount of sort of fraud that's going on, it's getting out of hand, it's out of control, sort of thing. And it's been much worse since the pandemic. Oh yes. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But along with that, there are a lot of things being put into that sort of into that paper, and one of those things was this sort of idea around turning means testing, turning disability benefits into means tested benefits. Now, obviously, the implications for that are quite negative, generally speaking, for most people that are claiming disability benefits. I mean, if you look at the far end of the scale, yes, somebody who has £5 million in their bank account, you know, you might think, well, is it right that they're getting a disability benefit? But for people that are disabled and maybe working part-time, that might be bringing in enough income that if they were to be on a comparable means test to universal credit, that would mean that it would take them out of being able to claim something like PIP. And if they are receiving full mobility, for example, and on the Motability scheme, that might mean that they lose their vehicle. If they were to lose their vehicle, say they're a single parent, they have to take the kids to school, then they have to get to work, they've got a specially adapted vehicle maybe. If they were to lose that vehicle, then actually that would make doing things like taking the kids to school and that very difficult, and it would also be extremely costly for them to buy a vehicle and have it specially adapted. So they may then look at that and make the decision to actually give up work. So rather than encouraging people into work, the potential for a means test being brought in could put people away from work. All of this said, it could very well be that this doesn't come into play and that things continue as they are. Even if it is introduced, it still could be challenged through Parliament and not actually come into fruition. Although, as we know from all of the changes to the welfare system over the last sort of 12 years or so, most challenges towards changes in the benefit system have kind of fallen flat, and indeed the majority of MPs have gone and voted for those changes across the board, whichever party they're in. And yeah, so you know, it could go either way. And even if it is introduced, we don't know at this stage exactly to what level that would be implemented. So it's very much a case of watch this space, and we will know more over the next month or two. And as soon as I know things, I will bring out information to you that's more definitive and actually give you an idea of how, if that means test comes in, how it's going to work, to which benefits it will be applied, and whether that also means that those benefits are going to be merged into universal credit or not, or all the other questions that we have about this very vague situation at the moment. But the reason I talk about it is because a few people have commented on my profile asking on the YouTube channel, asking questions around this. Have I heard anything? I am aware of it, but at the moment no significant details are coming through. So in other news, obviously there are significant delays to all benefits being processed at the moment, all disability benefits. Children's DLA has, for example, got delays going up to 6 months. for a lot of people. And so applications that were submitted maybe back at the start of the summer still aren't going to even be looked at until January at the earliest. That's the reports that's coming through there, and some of that information I'm getting back from clients that I've been working with. So there's delays on that. There's delays on PIP, even new applications. Also, review applications are being delayed in terms of them going through. Attendance allowance as well, that normally goes through in sort of 8 to 14 weeks. That's being extended, and new applicants for that benefit are receiving letters telling them, usually at the 8-week point, that there's going to be further delays. So if you are applying for that at the moment, it could take a lot longer. Generally speaking, most benefits, particularly PIP for example, they try to turn that round within 3 months, and indeed there are guidelines that they have to do that within a certain amount of time, within 3 months. So generally speaking, they're falling short of that for most people at the moment. Some people that have kind of quite easy to applications that are easy to make a decision on, positive or negative, they tend to be responding to those quite quickly. But where there's more complex cases and there's a lot more evidence that need to be looked at and things like that, those can run on a lot longer. However, do bear in mind, in terms of the guidelines of timescales, this does not apply to appeals as well. So when we say 3 months, that doesn't include mandatory reconsiderations and appeals. Mandatory reconsideration has to be turned around sort of within a month to 6 weeks, generally speaking, from the point of view of you getting the decision. You then have a month to reply to them. That could be extended for up to about 6 weeks if you get in touch with them and you've got good reasons why you need an extension with that, and then they tend to respond to that within 4 to 6 weeks at the most. So generally speaking, it's a reasonably quick turnaround for most people that go for mandatory reconsideration. But then when you go to appeal, you have a month to put in your appeal, and then it is entirely up to the court as to when they respond to that, and it is based on how many cases they've got going on at the time and so on. And so some people can be waiting for up to 12 months before they get a decision from an appeal, or even a date for an appeal. So things can be a lot slower even now. So do be aware of that. If you are putting those things in, there may be delays. If you are experiencing hardship, the advice is always the same, to get in touch with your local authority or your Citizens Advice Bureau as to what support might be available. It might be, if you're claiming universal credit, for example, even if you're on something like employment support allowance or whatever, there are hardship funds that are accessible, though do bear in mind these may have to be paid back. And of course, through the CAB and other organisations, you might be able to access support for food banks and so on. So yes, so be aware of those delays. And again, there are also delays happening still to the cost of living payments. So where people were expecting those payments to go in through this month, most people will have received them. However, there will be delays to some people. If you were expecting to receive the cost of living payment, or you're not sure about it, whether that be attached to personal independence payment, disability living allowance, children's version, or attendance allowance, or whether that be the cost of living payment that comes with universal credit, do get in touch with them on the support line to check, firstly, if you are eligible for it, and secondly, if you are eligible for it, if you are expecting it at any time, and what timescales it might be before that's delivered to you. There are a lot of recorded messages on the telephone that when you call the number that sort of explain bits around this, but do bear in mind these phone calls could take quite a while before you get to speak to anybody. I was on hold the other day just to get an extension on a PIP form for about 40 minutes before I spoke to someone. As soon as I spoke to someone, it was all done within sort of 2-3 minutes of speaking to them, but I was on hold for quite some time. So make sure you've got plenty of charge in your phone battery. So that's a sort of brief overview of what's going on at the moment. I can see that there's there's a question from Paul Thorpe on the means testing. If you're still watching, Paul, he's on low rate PIP, and he is having a payout due to an inheritance, which is fairly sizable. Will he be means tested? If a means test is brought in, then generally yes, any capital savings that you have will fall a part of that means test. So at the moment there isn't a means test, so for PIP, so that wouldn't be counted. But if it changes and there is a means test brought in, then they will be looking at savings as a part of that. Savings, generally speaking, with universal credit, if you've got more than sort of around £6,000-7,000, then it's problematic. With housing benefits, that's sort of higher shelf, which is around £16,000, but there's sort of step ratios that they work out. But yes, the amounts that Paul mentions, which is in excess of £16,000, that certainly would preclude most people for qualifying under most means tests. So thank you for that question, Paul. Good question. So now I'm going to move on now to having a look at the personal independence payment review. So if you are watching, no problem, Paul. If you are watching at the moment, this is probably going to go on for a short while. As you know, if you've been watching my channel before now, I do tend to waffle a bit, and I do tend to go a lot as well. So, but the idea is partly this will also make a video that people will be able to access again in the future. So, as I say, personal independence payment award review. The form has changed quite a bit, because originally the form was basically the same form that you filled in when you initially apply for PIP. So fairly long-winded, long sections and they're asking you to tell them everything about your condition. Obviously that was problematic for most people, in that you're essentially having to go through the entire process all over again, and if you have a long-term permanent health condition that is either going to stay the same or get worse, kind of a bit pointless to go through all of those things again. The DWP have cottoned on, I think, partly to that, and partly also to the fact that from an administrative point of view, it's very time consuming for them to have to read through all of that and do all that assessment again when they need not. And indeed, if generally speaking, the majority of appeals that are successful usually are at review. So it's when somebody's coming to review, they've had a long-term, long-established disability or health condition, they've come to doing a review, and then their PIP has been taken away, and then that evidence is presented to a tribunal, and the tribunal just goes, this is ridiculous, give them their PIP back. So that tends to happen a lot. So they're trying to reduce that to a certain extent. So they've adjusted the form, and indeed most of the disability benefit forms have been changed over the last sort of 12 months or so. So some of my videos that you might have seen in the past on PIP and attendance allowance and things like that are slightly out of date in terms of the form, so we'll be updating those in due course. But I thought we'd start off the process of looking at the PIP form and just going through it step by step, as I've done in my videos, of what you need to do and how to fill that in. So first of all, you've got the front sheet, which has got your information on it and a little how-to. Do read through that if you can, if you've got time to do that. It's always good to read through, just so you know what they're after. generally speaking, it's just telling you, first of all, to remove the front couple of sheets and keep them to one side for the future. Read the form and the information sheet that's there. Complete the form. It also reminds you to sign the declaration. It also reminds you to collect any supporting information or evidence, as I like to call it, that proves that you are affected in the way that you say you are by your disability or health conditions. And at least confirms that you do have the disability and health conditions that you say you do. First section, section 1, very simple, sign the declaration. Nice and easy. Basically, just to go over with this, when you sign the declaration, you are agreeing that the information that you give on the form is complete and correct, and that you understand that if you give the wrong or incomplete information, your benefit may be stopped and you may be prosecuted or may have to pay a penalty. Now, obviously, it's written with that tone to discourage people from submitting anything fraudulent. Generally speaking, the DWP make as many mistakes in assessing claims as people do in filling out claim forms. And so the go-to, if somebody is overpaid a benefit, is to just ask for that money back. It's only in cases where they think there is actually some serious fraud going on that they may begin a fraud investigation, and that you may look at criminal charges and possibly have to pay a penalty or something like that. But those, fortunately, don't happen often. More often than they should, because they often happen to people who are perfectly genuine, but thankfully that isn't something you should worry about too much when you start filling this in. And of course, you're agreeing with the declaration that you understand that if anything about your health condition changes, if it gets worse, but more particularly if it gets better, and that might change your eligibility, that you will get in touch with the DWP or the office that pays your personal independence payment to let them know. That also would include if you're having any protracted stays in hospital or in a care home as well. Because if you're in a care home, for example, and that's being paid for by the state, or you're in an NHS hospital, which is also being paid for by the state, and you're receiving that care and support there, then it may be that your PIP form, or indeed your attendance allowance or whatever, needs to stop. So if you're there for more than probably a week or two, I would get in touch with them. I think the rule's something like 4 weeks, but pretty much as soon as you're there for more than a week, just let them know. And it may be that you go in for a few days and you end up staying for longer. Just keep them updated as you go, if you can, if you're in a position to, or ask somebody to let them know on your behalf. So, yeah. So there we go. Section 2, about your health condition or disability. Ooh, fun. We're getting to the fun part now. It's all fun, isn't it? The first section is, of course, about a health professional that knows about your condition, and this may be your GP, could be a hospital consultant or a specialist nurse, and please provide their details below. Now, ordinarily, you're going to put your GP on here, and that's what I would recommend for the vast majority of people. Pop your GP's details in there. Everybody is assigned a GP. You may rarely ever see the same GP more than once with your doctor's surgery, but you will officially be assigned a GP. Some GP surgeries will allow you to work this out on their website. It might be that they say all people whose surname begins with A through to F will be assigned to Dr. Smith. All people, as an example, people from G through to, I don't know, K will be assigned to Dr. such and such, and something like that on their website, which you can check, or you could just give them a call to find out. But it doesn't desperately matter for this. You could put I see any GP. You might have a preferred GP that you go to see, who you do get to see more often than not, and you might want to put their name in there. Obviously, list what their profession is, their address, their postcode, and the surgery telephone number. Of course, it might be somebody else that you see more regularly that knows more about you. If you've got a mental health condition, it might be a community psychiatric nurse, a CPN. If you are getting sort of ongoing oncological support, if you have cancer, it might be the specialist there or a specialist nurse that you see regularly or something like that. But it's whoever's the best person to reference either your health condition or disability or your multiple health conditions or disabilities. And of course you have to tick the box to say that you consent to them getting in touch with that person should they require doing so. Generally speaking, they don't do that as a rule, and indeed they do remind you that it's not incumbent on them to seek out supporting information or supporting evidence about your health problem. It's incumbent on you to provide it in this application, but it might be for whatever purpose. If they need to check up, they will or can do so. So you can consent or not consent, but I advise that you consent. Generally speaking, everybody consents. If you have a good reason for not consenting, it might be wise for you to get in touch with them and explain why. So, second part of section 2 is tell us about any current health conditions or disabilities that you have. So, this includes existing conditions, so conditions that they already know about, and any new conditions that you've developed since they last looked at your award. And tell them approximately when each one started. So even if you told them about a health condition in the past, don't assume that they should still know that. Put that condition is still there, the date that it started, because this confirms that the condition is still affecting you. Some conditions do get better, so by including it, you're confirming that it is still affecting you. And obviously, if you've got more conditions than fits into this section, you can continue that either at the back of the form where there's a space to do so, or on a separate piece of paper. But always remember to put your name and national insurance number on any separate pieces of paper. So once you've listed all your health conditions, underneath that, it's got a section for you to include what medication you're currently taking. If you have a current copy of your repeat prescription, you can send this to them as well as part of your supporting information, but don't send them fact sheets or leaflets about your medications. They don't need it. They can Google it if they need to. And generally speaking, if like me, if you see on there atorvastatin, we all know what a statin's for. Atorvastatin, we know that's probably prescribed to somebody who's got, some kind of maybe heart condition or post-stroke or something like that. So, whereas somebody who's on simvastatin might not have any issues with their heart or whatever. So, once you've seen a few of these forms, you get to know what the medication is anyway, so you don't need to include all of that sort of stuff. Just put down what you're taking, what dosage, and the frequency, how many times a day, how many times a week, and so on. There are some funny medications out there you take once a week, or that you have to take but not eat anything and remain standing for at least half an hour after you've taken it, and things like that. So make sure that information goes in there. If you've got significant problems with writing it, then and you are including the repeat prescription, then you could probably get away with not filling that in, but generally it's good to have kind of both in there if you can. The next section on page 11 of 24 is tell us about any treatments, therapies or surgery since they last looked at your award on the 2nd. Oh, I'm not going to tell you when my award was, though. If you're quick, you can spot it. So whenever your award last was. So the name of what treatment or therapy or operation, whatever you've had or are having that helps you, again, list this very much in the same way as you do with your medication. So if you've had maybe a knee replacement surgery, you might pop that in and the date that you had it. If you're having ongoing physiotherapy or counselling or some sort of emotional support, you might put that in. Equally, it might be things like ointments. So you might have included an ointment, for example, under the medication section, but you could put it in here potentially. Might also be therapies that might help with things like that aren't prescribed or part of the NHS. So that might be what they call it when they stick the needles in you, something like that. Osteopath or something as well. Reiki, if you do that, possibly. Not sure of the efficacy of that, but whatever it is you're doing, if you think it benefits you and makes a difference to your health condition or disability, pop it in there. Hospital admissions is the next section. So have you had any hospital admissions since the last time that you applied for them? Put them in there. Anything that's before the last time you applied or was included in the last time you applied, you don't really need to include that. They're just looking for anything new. So if you've not been in the hospital, don't need to put anything in there. Again, if you've had a knee replacement, it goes in here. And just to be clear as well, a hospital admission is not you going in for a day, having a bit of surgery and popping home in the afternoon. That doesn't count. You have to spend a night in the hospital. So even if it's just one night, that's fine. But if it's just you pop in the morning, they whip something off and send you home in the afternoon with a box of paracetamol and antibiotics, then that doesn't need to go in as an admission. That can go in the first section at the top. Potato, it's probably being a bit pedantic. As long as it's in one of those sections, it doesn't really matter. I'm sure they'll work it out themselves, but that's where it's supposed to go. Okay, so the next section, section 3, how your health condition or disability affects you. So this section asks you to tell them about any changes in how you carry out the 12 PIP daily living or mobility activities since we last looked at your award. Also use this section, and this is really important, also use this section to tell us if things have stayed the same. Okay, so you need to answer all the questions, and the information sheet can help you with this. So you need to give as much detail as you possibly can with these, and obviously they also remind you that if you need more space, as I say, you can use the section at the back where I'll just check actually, I'm saying the section at the back, there might not be one. Well, there is, but it's very small. I should check that before I started, but yes, so you may want to continue on another piece of paper. So clearly any changes in your condition or any new conditions that you've developed that are having an impact on your daily living tasks needs to go in here. But you also need to make it very clear to them if you still have the same level of need that you had previously. Don't just leave a section blank. So if previously you got 3 points or 2 points on preparing food and cooking, you need to say something along the lines of, this is the same as it was before. Everything I said previously in my last application is still the same. I'm still having the same level of difficulty. Okay, you need to make that very clear, because if you leave it blank, you'll get 0 points. They'll go, well, obviously he's fine now. They will make that assumption, so you must write something in these sections. So, looking at the sections, first of all, it says, tell us if something has changed and approximately when. So in answer to this question for preparing food and cooking, I might say, well, actually, my condition is exactly the same as it was before. I still have the same difficulty with preparing food and cooking. I'm affected in the same way by fatigue and so on. Tell us how you manage this activity now, including the use of any aids that you need. Again, if this hasn't changed and I've still got the same level of needs, I would put I still manage this activity in the same way as I did previously. I still use a perching stool. I still have to take regular breaks while I'm doing that. I still have to use memory reminders, timers, and so on and so forth, whatever it is. And it says, tell us about any changes to the help you need or the help you get from another person. So this is quite different in itself, and this is what we're seeing with the new PIP forms, is that they're being broken down into these three sections to make it a little bit more clear of how to structure what it is that you're writing about how your health conditions and disabilities affect you. Generally speaking, people, when filling in a form, particularly if they're doing it without support, can kind of write lots of different things all over the place, and it's easy then for somebody to miss an important piece of information when they're reading through it. So having it broken down into these sections does make it a little bit more helpful in terms of getting things across. So if you are extending this out, if you've got a lot to write and you're extending that out onto an extra piece of paper, maybe put this as A, B and C and kind of carry on those answers in that way if you want, or write it completely. It might be that you type it, for example, that you prefer to type than write by hand if you've got very bad handwriting, you're dyslexic, or you have a disability that prevents you from mechanically writing, but you can do with a thing. You might write in this, then please see my attached sheet A and question 1 answer A, and so on. So always make a note in here if you are continuing it on another piece of paper, or you're entirely writing it on another piece of paper. Make sure you make that note there. So in terms of changes to the help you need or the help you get from another person, what's changed? Is that person, if you were receiving help from another person, is that person delivering the same level of help? Has that increased in some way? Has that help changed in some way? Has that been replaced by a mechanical device or something like that? Have you got some new piece of equipment that now does what a person used to do in the past? And also, as ever, very important, make it very clear if you need help with something but you are not getting that help. Okay? Don't just say, well, I need help with this. So don't just say, well, I struggle with this. Say, I need help with this. I actually need physical help with that, but I'm not at this stage getting it. So make that very clear. So that's if nothing's changed. But obviously, if things have changed, if you develop new conditions and new things like that, then you need to go into that level of detail that you might have done with your old conditions in the previous application. You need to approach that as if you're kind of applying for the first time in a way. So if previously, for example, you had arthritis that was in your hands but not in your arms, it might be that you say, but now you have it in your arms. It might be that you say, well, previously I had difficulty with chopping vegetables, but now I can't lift pans either. And I've got difficulty getting things in and out of the oven. So where previously I would have had help with somebody chopping vegetables and chopping things for me, now I don't get that help because actually I don't do that and I just use microwave meals, or I have meals delivered or something like that. So you need to, again, make it very clear why that's changed as well. So okay, you've got arthritis in your elbows, but what does that actually mean? You're getting pain, you're getting discomfort, it's causing you to be quite tired. There might be a risk in terms of you dropping a hot pan and it might scald you. Put that level of detail in there. Don't just assume because you say, oh, I've got arthritis in my elbow now when I just had it in my hands and my wrist before, that they're going to extrapolate and say, oh, well, obviously what happened with your hands is now going to translate to your wrist. They're not going to assume that. They're not going to make that. You've got to write that out for them and put that level of detail in. Again, there may not be enough space here, so carry it on a separate piece of paper. So this kind of sort of guide for how to fill in question 1 translates across to all of the questions with this form. So with eating and drinking, again, if things are the same as they were before, if this was a section where you scored 0 points before, and because you didn't have any problems with eating and drinking, it's probably fine to say that it's the same if you don't think you did have any problems with that. The question is, what if actually they should have awarded you points on that section and you didn't challenge that at mandatory reconsideration or appeal because you got the rate that you thought you should be on, but actually you got maybe 2 points less than you should have, or a point less, or whatever, and you thought, well, I can't be bothered to fight it because it's too stressful, it's too upsetting to have to do that. I've got the right rate for me, I'm happy with that. So you get to eating and drinking. Should you put in all that information that you did before? Yes, absolutely you should. Now, whether or not you get awarded those points when you didn't before is difficult to know at this stage, and that may be something that you take up at mandatory reconsideration and appeal if you feel that you should have been awarded those points in this review. But again, with the PIP form, they're always talking about how things changed, how things got worse. So it might be that actually your condition has progressed, or maybe you didn't give the level of detail that they wanted to see in the previous form to get it across, and you might be able to put more detail in on this occasion about how that's developed, sort of thing. So thank you, Tanya, good to see you here. Sorry, just a comment came up on the thing, thank you. So with the eating and drinking section, so again, just to have a quick overview of things that might go into that, if something's changed and approximately when. Again, you're repeating yourself here, saying, well, nothing's changed particularly, but I still have the same needs that I did previously. I still have acid reflux, I still choke when I'm chewing and swallowing, I still can get very bad digestion, I've still got to make changes to my diet and have to be really careful when I'm eating a product, if I'm out somewhere, whatever, maybe you've got celiacs or something, things like that. Maybe you have to use a feeding tube or similar device, maybe it's the PEG type, which is in your stomach, and so actually that there's a risk of infection because there's essentially an open wound in your stomach and you're having to make sure you don't get food in it when you're in the thing, and you've got the set, so there could be all of those things. If it's still the same, make sure you reference what it is that you have to do, as well as the fact that it's still the same. Tell them how you manage the activity now. So again, it might be that some aids or things have changed that you use. It might be that things, maybe you've got some different medication that in some ways helps, but in other ways makes things worse somehow. You might want to put that information in there. It may be that things have progressed and that condition has actually got worse. It might be, for example, you might have dysphagia where you're not swallowing properly and actually that's got worse. It might be that you have dysphagia following a stroke, for example, and actually it's got better, but you still have episodes where you choke, or maybe the food goes into your lungs and that causes problems with breathing and so on. So whatever it is, put that level of detail in that, and again, any help you get from another person. So in some respects, that obviously it might be somebody helping you by feeding you in some way. It might be somebody helping you regurgitate if you do get food going into your lungs. If you are using a PEG as a feeding device, then maybe somebody's helping you with that. It could even be just something as simple as cutting up the food on your plate, or making sure that as you're eating, you're swallowing it and the airway's clear. It could be any of these things. But again, put at least some detail in there. Don't leave the section blank, whatever you do, unless you have no problems in that area. Then you can leave it blank. Again, same rules again with managing treatments. If something's changed, tell them what's changed. If it hasn't changed, tell them that it hasn't changed, but you're still having the same issues that you had before. So managing treatments and taking medication. Taking medication is fairly simple. If it's swallowing a tablet, in terms conceptually, it's fairly simple. The tablet goes in your mouth, you swallow it. But obviously, like with eating and drinking, if you've got dysphagia, then you have some trouble swallowing food, you're going to have trouble swallowing tablets. A lot of people have trouble swallowing tablets anyway. They have to break pills up. Some people use pill crushers and have to mix them with a yogurt or something like that. So that might be an element of it. Some people have to have intravenous medication. Obviously, people who are diabetic will do that, but there could be other conditions where that's required. People that are very allergic to stuff, they've got to carry an EpiPen with them everywhere. Managing treatments, again, that can be things like physiotherapy. It could be dialysis, for example. Some people have to go into the hospital for dialysis. Some people do it at home on their own. I remember one person who was having dialysis at home that had to have these huge bags of liquid brought into their house, and it took up an entire room just with all these bags of liquid for them to do dialysis at home. But that was a lot easier for them than getting into the hospital that was sort of 15, 20 miles away when they couldn't drive. So, so one person I knew had to, do it with a hand pump. So all sorts of things can qualify as managing treatments. And again, it might be something that you were doing and were awarded points for before. Just make sure they know you're still doing it and what it is that you're doing. And of course, monitoring your health condition, that can be all kinds of things that constitute monitoring a health condition. It might be doing blood pressure, it might be checking blood sugars with the little sort of thing. It could be something like that. It actually might be monitoring mental health changes as well, and how you do that, whether somebody helps you do that. So again, is that help you're getting from another person? Often we can have changes to our mental health state and not be aware of it ourselves, but we have somebody who, even though they're a family member, they're also our carer, and then we'll be saying, look, I think you're having a bad day, I don't think we should be doing this today, we should do this instead, or maybe you need to take an extra medication that you wouldn't normally take. Things like that. So all this sort of thing constitutes monitoring a health condition. Make sure you put that in there. Just a quick time check. So obviously I know I tend to run. Try not to take too much time. Washing and bathing, same thing. If it's changed, tell them about the changes. If you've got a new condition that's causing more problems when washing and bathing, tell them about that. If nothing's changed, tell them nothing's changed, but you're still having to do the same things that you did before. Unless you're not having to do those things, of course, and then tell them that you're not. But also tell them about any aids you might be using. Again, this is another area where it might be that when you originally applied, you didn't have occupational therapy equipment. Now you do, and you're using that, and that's helping you get in and out of the bath and shower. Or maybe you've got a bath lift or something that you didn't have before. But actually you need support with the bath lift because it's an electric thing, and someone has to stand there and push the button to raise you up and raise you down, where previously you just got stuck in the bath and no one helped you out. I don't know. But again, try and go into as much detail as possible about not only what's changed, what equipment that you're using, help you're getting from other people. All things constitute, not all things, but all things relating to washing and bathing that would be qualifying. Could be doing your hair, cutting your toenails, could be putting on makeup if you're wearing makeup is a part of your sense of well-being kind of thing. If you've been used to wearing makeup a lot and you're not able to keep wearing makeup and you're feeling miserable about yourself, that might have an impact on your mental health. Or maybe you can, but somebody helps you put it on. All these kinds of things constitutes that. Some people, for example, might only be able to get their hair done when they go to see a hairdresser, and I know a lot of older people that just go to the hairdresser just to have their hair washed and set. They don't have it cut, they just have it washed and set because their arthritis is so bad they can't do that themselves. talk about all of that. Managing toilet needs and incontinence, again, if nothing has changed, make sure that you tell them that although nothing has changed, you still have those conditions and it still affects you in the same way and you still have the same needs. But if something has changed, make sure you say, I know I'm getting a stuck record now. Things that constitute toilet needs. Obviously, you are looking at things like getting on and off the toilet physically. Continence needs. It does say incontinence here, but that there's different types of incontinence, obviously front and back. You know what I mean? And obviously as well, there's different types of incontinence as well. Some people will get urge incontinence. That might be that they have to go. They can hold it, but it's extremely painful and they have to go immediately as soon as they feel it. And if they don't, maybe they'll have an accident. Some people just don't even know when it's happening. Maybe you have to wear pads, maybe you have help getting the pads on and off. Maybe it's actually soreness that comes as a result of it because you're wet all the time, and actually you're getting like essentially nappy rash. Might be that you're physically not able to clean yourself, and so after you've done your business and somebody has to help you with that, maybe you use some sort of device to help you with that. Maybe you've had a bidet installed as part of your disabled facilities grant that you didn't have before you applied, and you use that now, but actually it's a bit low and you need a bar to get up off it. Whatever it is, all those things, put them in there. Leave no stone unturned. Dressing and undressing. Again, if something's changed, great, tell them about it. If nothing's changed, tell them nothing has changed, but that you're still doing the same things that you were doing before, etc., etc. Are you getting any help with it? Essentially, dressing and undressing can be difficult. One thing that I will say is, because I haven't mentioned them in this little video, is the descriptors. You can download the descriptors. So just type in PIP descriptors and you get an idea of what it is they're looking for. And what they award points for and how you might demonstrate that. So with dressing and undressing, for example, if you can't get clothes on your bottom half yourself, either without using a device or assistance or it having a significant negative impact on you, that's 2 points. Top half, another 2 points, sort of thing. So that, if you can't get things on your top and your bottom without any help, then that's 4 points altogether. So think about those kind of things. Use the descriptors if you can to give you a bit of a guide of what you need to get across about what you're doing for yourself. Maybe you're using something to help you put on your socks or put on your shoes. Maybe you're using something as someone helps you put on a coat. Maybe you can't do buttons up because your hands aren't working well. Maybe it's a psychological issue with dressing and undressing. Maybe you're not able to judge what the right clothes are for the day. Maybe that's because of a mental health problem. Yes, of course, but actually it might be sensory impairment. If you're severely sight impaired, you might not be able to look out the window to see if it's what the weather's like. So you might have to kind of go out hoping that it's going to, you've got the right coat on and actually you haven't, and you end up too hot or too cold. And you would benefit from somebody helping you there. Maybe use an Alexa device to tell you what that is. That might, Alexa, what's the weather like today? Fortunately, I haven't got an Alexa in the room. It might be things like that. So all of those things can constitute support towards it. And again, it may be help that you need from another person, but you're not actually getting as well. So make that clear if that's the case too. Speaking to people, hearing, understanding what they've said and being understood, section 7. Essentially, this comes across as if it's about your ability to physically hear, which it can be. You may be deaf, you may use sign language, you may use hearing aids, all of that kind of thing. But equally, it might be a cognitive issue that you have. For example, you might have receptive aphasia, so you might hear what somebody's saying, but not actually understand what they've said because your brain isn't telling you the right meaning of the right words. And that might even be a temporary thing. For example, if somebody has fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or something like that, they get brain fog. Again, if somebody's going through chronic health problems with things like, I don't know, cancer treatment, things like that, that can have an impact. You get brain fog, you're very tired, you think people talk to you and you go, say all that again, sorry, I heard what you said, but I didn't hear what you said. That might be something that you need to get across as well in this. You might need support with that. Equally, you might react in a way when you hear certain types of information or sounds and things like that. So you could get that across in there as well. And again, if something's changed, tell them so. If it hasn't changed, tell them it's just the same as it was before. You still need the same support you did before. Reading and understanding signs, symbols, and written words, very important again. Obviously, this is an example of reading and understanding. So, first of all, you may have a visual impairment, so you can't read these things. You may use a computer or digital device that reads to you. That kind of thing. It might be that someone reads things for you. It might be that you can't understand signs or symbols. Again, receptive aphasia can do that with reading and things. So all of these things go into that. That can be quite important if you're trying to get about the place and you can't see a warning sign or whatever. You keep bashing your head on things or falling downstairs and stuff. That's important as well. So again, go into that. Mixing with other people. Now this is one of those sections. I'm going to have a drink, bear with me. Mixing with other people. This is one of those sections where we're getting across a lot of mental health conditions in this. Mixing with other people it can be about anxiety, it can be about stress, it can be about the number of people as well. So it might be when you first applied for this, you had really bad agoraphobia and you can maybe mix with one or two people that you know if you know them really well. And maybe that's improved now. You can go to a kind of a group, a help group of some kind, but there's like 3 or 4 people and it's in a kind of safe environment, and actually going, if you don't have support to go there and do that, it's still a very stressful thing. It's also the type of people that you're mixing with. So some people could be okay with mixing with a friend or a family member, but not so good mixing with a GP or a doctor. It might be about your behaviour as well. So if you've got a progressive condition, actually things might have changed quite considerably. If you have a neurological condition that's progressive and it affects your behaviour, that could be something that you get across in this situation, particularly if that has an impact on people who are with you, who, maybe if you're a husband and wife and you've got a one of you has developed a form of dementia that's progressive and things, and to start off with, when you first apply, you've got issues with memory and things like that, so you get awarded it. But now things have moved on a bit, and you've got some kind of like, you come out with words that you shouldn't, or maybe you can't control your emotions in groups or in public and things like that. So all of these kind of things can go in here. Yes, and some comments in there from Mercy, some thanks, and can't disagree with that at all, Mercy. Yeah, definitely. It does make you feel even worse. There's no argument there. Think about all those things in terms of mixing with other people, and the situations in which that occurs, and how you might do that. Making decisions about spending and managing your money. So obviously a lot of people have things set up with direct debit these days, but not everybody does, and it can be quite difficult even dealing with money, there's definitely a cognitive element to dealing with money, which can become, as I said, if you've got something like brain fog or maybe a progressive neurological condition, that can be difficult. But it could also be physical, practical things, the actual handling of money. Reading a bank statement. If you can't read, can you read a bank statement? If you've got a visual impairment, things like that. That might make it difficult to manage your money. So you might actually need somebody to help you with those kind of things. Maybe you've got a power of attorney in place and somebody actually has taken over your finances completely. You yourself might be, if you've got power of attorney, you might be filling in one of these forms for the person that you're representing and looking after. And so that might come across in this. And again, if things have changed in that situation, they might have improved, they might have got worse, or they might have just kind of changed, as in it's not got better or worse, but the way that we're dealing with it is different now. So you might want to put that in. And obviously, as before, if nothing has changed, but you're still doing the same things, make that clear. I'm really drilling down on that point. Planning and following a route to another place. And we'll get to moving around as well. So these final two questions are make up the award for the mobility component of this. So this is a component that people can get quite worried and quite stressed about. So again, it's important to be very detailed here, as it is with everything in this, and to make it very clear if things have not changed and you're still doing the same things that you were before. Planning and following a route to another place. This is difficult because this is partly it's about the psychological element of preparing to go out. So one of the elements that comes into this is, are you prevented from leaving the house or planning a journey or going to another place because you have overwhelming anxiety and distress that prevents you from doing those things? So that's a big element of this. So if that's the case, make sure that comes across in here. There are different levels by which you can plan or follow a route of a journey that they look at as well. So it's kind of looking at those kind of things as, what are you having to do to prepare beforehand? Is it a journey that's nearby that you know very well? Is it a journey that you don't know very well? Are there differences between this? Do you have difficulty the same in both situations? Is it worse with one or the other? Those kind of things. Do you use any aids to help you with that kind of thing? Obviously we can use Google Maps. Most people use Google Maps to help, or whatever your sat nav is, not just to help you to get along the road, but also to walk places. But do you also need other things as well? So do you need somebody to be monitoring your movements using a GPS tracker? Have you got a falls alarm? Are you likely to have a fall? If you haven't got your falls alarm, what happens then? Some people may not be tracked specifically, but they may have a tracker that sets off an alarm out after they go outside a certain area. Things like that. Also, what do you need to prepare for a journey? If you've got severe incontinence, that might provide a lot of anxiety about where you're going to, and that might factor in toilet stops, or using some kind of collection device, let's call it, when you're on the route and things like that. So all of that needs to come across in here. Again, if you never put that in before, that level of detail before, it's good to put it in now, definitely. But you can pick up enough points here that could tip the balance depending on what your mobility levels are. This is also quite important about supervision as well. So if you are looking after a person who is cognitively impaired in some way and that they need supervision, maybe their behaviour might be inappropriate, or maybe they would be at risk of having an accident or being injured when they're out and about, and they need to have somebody with them at all times. Maybe that person is you. Then again, this is the section for that information. moving around. Whoa. Everyone's least favourite section. How far can you walk? Very tricky to get this right. So to give you an idea of distance, they say 50 metres is approximately 5 buses parked end to end. Well, that's great. That's still hard to kind of get your head around that. Now, what they're not doing here is saying, has anything changed? They're not saying that. They're asking you what it is again, as if they're asking you for the first time. So fill it in as if you're filling it in for the first time. Don't think that the same rules with all the previous questions that we've covered apply with this one. Write it as it absolutely is right now. Forget about what you wrote before. Write it as it is right now for you or for the person that you're representing. Less than 20 metres. So basically, if you can't walk, you can't walk. It's as simple as that. If you only move a little bit around your house, like you get from your chair to the toilet, and then you have to, when you're in the loo, you have to rest, and then you have to get yourself back, and it's difficult to do so, and you're getting out of breath when you do it. Maybe you have severe COPD and you're on oxygen or something like that. Maybe it's physical pain. Maybe you have to use a hoist to get into a wheelchair just to get to the toilet and then get back, or something like that. Whatever it is, that's less than 20 metres. If you are leaving, if you're covering a distance between 20 and 50 metres, so think about not how far you go overall, but how far you go before you need to stop and rest. Before you either experience severe pain and discomfort that you need to stop and rest, or the extreme fatigue, or you're very out of breath, or maybe you might fall over, any of those kind of things. If you need to stop and rest for 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever the rest period is, if you need to stop and rest, that's the 50 metres there, or that's the distance there. So if that's less than 50 metres, between 20 and 50 metres, that's the box you tick. If it's between 50 and 200 metres, that's the box you tick, or 200 metres or more. If it's 200 metres or more, if you're ticking that box, and if that's genuinely true, obviously don't say it's less than that if it is less than that. But if that's genuinely true, then probably you're not going to qualify for any mobility or any points on this section. That doesn't mean you won't get the mobility payment at all, because if you get 12 points on section 11, for example, and it is possible to do so, then you could still get the mobility component. If you tick 200 metres or more on this, then you're probably not going to get any points on this at all. So the next question is, do you need to use an aid or assistance from another person to help you walk? Tick the boxes that apply to you. Sometimes need assistance, always need an aid, always need assistance. Tick whichever's appropriate. Now, what I would say with this, and actually with all of the questions on here, and this is something that's really important to get across, is variability of your condition. So on previous PIP forms, it would say there would be a box to tick to say if things vary with it, like some days it's worse than others and things like that. It's really important that you get that across as to if there is a variation, and I've said this in other videos as well, if there is any kind of variation in your ability to carry out tasks on how many days and the frequency of those days. So for example, if it might be that in the morning you can't move around and stuff like that, but in the afternoon you've got a window of about 4 hours where actually you're okay, and then after that it tails off again, and that's 7 days a week, then that's what you put. If it's 5 days out of 7 in a week, then you put that. If it's 1 week in a month, then you put that. So it's important that you get across when those variations occur, how long they occur for, and hitting the mic again, how long they occur for, and how many weeks or days in a month and things like that you get that across. There is a classic idea that still does the rounds that you should fill it in as if it is your worst day, and that's fine in some respects if you're trying to get somebody to share things who wouldn't necessarily think to, because I've dealt with a lot of older people who go, oh, I can manage, and like, yes, but you've got no legs, so those kind of things, it does have to get past that, but actually you might be misrepresenting yourself if you're to say, well, if you're to put it as if it's on your worst day, and actually have days where you can get about. So it's really important to get that variability across. So tell them how you manage that. So it might be, and this is very similar to filling out a blue badge form. I can walk this level of distance, but then I need to stop. Maybe I use a walker, maybe I use a wheelchair, maybe I use a mobility scooter for further distances, things like that. Tell them about any risks as well. Are you a falls risk? Are you likely to stumble and fall? Are you likely to injure yourself? What the frequency of that is. Those kind of things are important as well. Again, getting out of breath is quite important in that. And again, any changes to the help you need or the help you get from another person. So again, there's this hint about changes here. So do again, make it clear that things are as they were before, if they are, but what you have to do. And I would say with this, just give them all that level of detail again, if you can. And yeah, so generally speaking, that's pretty much that with the mobility side of things. If you want more detail on these questions and you haven't got sick to death of the sound of my voice, then please feel free to go back and watch one of my previous PIP videos. You may have already watched them before. They've asking about the Motability thing here, so if you think you might be eligible for that, you can tick that box, but do find out about the Motability scheme. Essentially, all they're going to do, if you get the higher rate, is post you some leaflets and information on that. But what a lot of people don't realise at first about the Motability scheme is that the mobility component is taken away from you and given to the Motability people, and in return you get a car, minus insurance and or is it insured? I can't remember. You have to look at the details, but it's definitely you have to put petrol in it. So yeah, but you do lose your mobility component. So if that is something that you have to rely on, and then you sign up for the Motability scheme, great, you get a car, but your income, that monthly income from this, will be lower. Question 13 is, as I said, the question where you can tell them anything else that you think they need to know about your disability or health condition. And this is quite important because you can get across things that maybe didn't fit into the other questions here, or any changes or anything that's kind of come up that doesn't relate to things in there, maybe how your condition's progressing, or something like that. You can tell them about support that you're getting from somebody, maybe what benefit that is to you, and so on. So you can tell them anything else. You can also run on some of the answers to previous questions if you feel you need to give them a bit more detail. I would say generally it's better to run on to a separate piece of paper about that. And again, as I say, any separate pieces of paper that you add in, you need to put your name and your national insurance number at the top of all of them. And yeah, that's basically the form. You get a little reminder thing at the back to say to you, make sure that you signed and dated everything that you need to. And then you absolutely, before you send it off, make sure you take copies. That's really important. Take copies before you send it off. You can send it off in the envelope that you get given. It will more than likely get to them. It is free post, you don't need to pay for that, but if you want to be absolutely certain that they're getting it within a certain length of time, particularly if you're getting close to the date that it needs to be sent back by, Do bear in mind, if you haven't asked for an extension, you can always give them a call and ask for an extension. Most of the time they'll grant it. I asked for a week's extension, they gave me 2 weeks because of the postal strikes that's been going on. Things like that. It's worth doing that. But if you want to send it special, recorded, signed for delivery to make sure it gets there the very next day, that's absolutely fine, and it will do that. When it gets there, they just basically photocopy it, gets uploaded to their computers, and then the original form. What happens to that, I'm not sure. Probably gets mulched. And then following that, usually within 3 to 4 weeks, in ideal terms, you should get them contact you to make an appointment to do a telephone assessment if they think it's necessary. For some people, they don't think it's necessary and they just make the award without doing it. For other people, they will still go through the telephone assessment. There are some occasions where they do face-to-face assessments, but basically now, pretty much as a rule, it's done over the phone these days, and then they will make a decision. As I say, it is important that you get this back to them within the date that they allow you to get it back, because they will be endeavouring to, if they continue the award, keep it running so that you don't lose your benefit. And if you don't send it back in time, they may stop your award immediately, even if the date of it finishing isn't till, say, 2 or 3 months ahead. They may stop it now, so you must get it back in time. So there we go, that's enough out of me for this evening. I hope this has been helpful to all of you that stayed along, and to everyone that's given me a like. That's fantastic, thank you. I'm guessing that the most of you have watched it live are subscribers, so thank you for subscribing. But if you are new to this, please do like and subscribe and share if you can. I will be producing more videos in the future, and I will be doing more of these live videos. I'm going to try and make it a regular thing, so you can ask questions of me live. And so thanks very much, and I'll see you all very soon. Do take care, and if you are doing one of these applications at the moment, best of luck with everything. Okay, thanks very much. Good night.